They handed me a name tag that read, "The Disappointment," right there, in printed font, at my parents' 40th anniversary party. No one flinched. No one corrected it. They all just laughed. "Hi, I'm Ava. I've paid off mortgages, built businesses, and saved this family more than once." But in that ballroom, I was still the footnote they pretended not to see. So I didn't fight. I took notes. And when the time came, I rewrote the guest list. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family? If this hits close to home, drop a comment. I'd love to hear your story because, trust me, you're not alone. I didn't expect to be welcomed. I didn't expect warmth or tears or even a smile that lasted more than a second. But I also didn't expect a name tag. The valet barely looked up when I handed him the keys. His gloved hand took them smoothly, and I adjusted the sleeve of my ivory pantsuit before turning toward the entrance of the Sullivan estate. Sunlight spilled through the tall windows, making the gold trim on the anniversary banner shimmer like a wedding invitation. "Gregory and Marjorie, 40 years of love," it read, in cursive thick enough to scream money. The entrance smelled like roses and citrus, an expensive kind of clean. A string quartet played near the main archway, and guests floated between champagne flutes and smoked salmon canapes as if choreographed. From a distance, it could have passed for a charity gala. Only when I stepped closer did I realize how many faces turned and then quickly looked away, as if I were the pianist's ex-wife, showing up uninvited. The hostess, clipboard in hand, scanned her list. Name? Ava Sullivan. There was a slight pause. She blinked, nodded, then motioned. "Right this way." Her heels clicked against the marble as she led me through the crowd, weaving between relatives I hadn't seen in years, and some I hoped I'd never see again. I didn't bother waving. I'd learned long ago that polite indifference stings less than false niceties. We reached the far side of the ballroom. The music barely reached this corner, drowned out by the faint whir of an industrial air vent and the occasional swoosh of a bathroom door. The table stood alone, next to a wall painted too beige to be intentional. Plastic peonies slumped in a vase, the kind you'd find in a clearance bin at a craft store. And in the center of the table, beneath a folded napkin and a single butter knife, was the name tag. Clean white cardstock, block serif font. My name, replaced by 2 words, "The Disappointment." No one gasped. No one pointed. The cruelty was wrapped in silence, like a gift only I was meant to open. I didn't react. My heels didn't even pause on the tile. I pulled out the chair, laid my clutch on the table, and sat. Chin up, shoulders back, eyes still. From across the room, I could see Savannah, glowing in a rose gold dress that looked tailored to her bones. She laughed, head tilted, surrounded by a semicircle of cousins, acquaintances, and 2 men I didn't recognize. Her hair had that perfect beach wave look that takes 2 hours and a curling wand. She looked over once, right at me, but her gaze passed like light through glass. "Wow, they really sat you back here," a voice behind me said. Aunt Lynn, holding a half-empty flute of sparkling wine. "At least you got a seat this time." I smiled without teeth. "It's a lovely view of the restroom door. Very active." She blinked, unsure if it was sarcasm or gratitude, and wandered off before deciding. I looked at the table settings. Everyone else had fine crystal glasses and centerpieces of fresh orchids. Mine had a sweating cup of water and a floral-scented air freshener, too close for comfort. I picked up the name tag between 2 fingers, held it just long enough to read it again, and placed it down gently. From the main stage, I heard a fork tap against glass. My father stood at the mic, champagne flute in hand. His tuxedo fit a little tighter than it used to, but he stood tall, proud. "Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this special night," he began, beaming at Marjorie. 40 years, 4 decades of love, growth, and unforgettable memories. Applause. Glasses clinked. He gestured toward Savannah. "And to our daughter, Savannah, whose vision and creativity helped us redesign this space into the beautiful venue you're all enjoying tonight. She's the reason this dream came true. More applause. Savannah waved coyly. And of course, he continued, some of our children take a little longer to bloom. Some are still finding their way. The crowd chuckled, lightly, safely. He didn't look at me, but he didn't need to. I didn't touch my water. I didn't blink. I just sat, still, breathing, listening. A cousin brushed past behind me, whispering just loud enough. Didn't think she'd actually show. His girlfriend giggled. I let the words hang in the air unacknowledged. My heart didn't race. My chest didn't burn. I wasn't sad. Not anymore. Humiliation, when you've grown used to it, has a way of dulling into clarity. I opened my clutch, found my phone, and unlocked it with a quiet tap. I didn't start a message or a post. I didn't text Eli. Instead, I scrolled to a folder labeled Receipts. The room sparkled with praise, with curated smiles and champagne. No one looked my way, but I watched them all. Their comfort, their celebration, their convenient forgetfulness. They'd erased me from their program, their speeches, their photographs, but not from the facts. I sat there, still as stone, while the next toast began. A server offered dessert. I declined with a nod. My name tag lay on the table. Untouched now, the words still visible in the low, amber light. I didn't move. I watched, and I waited. They thought ignoring me would make me disappear. Instead, I started archiving. Upstairs, in the guest suite of the Sullivan estate, the party music had become a distant echo. The ocean wind brushed faintly against the windows, pushing the sheer curtain in slow, sleepy breaths. I sat at the edge of the armchair, laptop open. The only light in the room, a soft white glow across my lap. The glass of wine beside me was untouched. I wasn't in the mood for numbing. I needed clarity. I opened a folder labeled Family Legacy Hidden Edition. Inside were subfolders neatly dated and titled. The first one read, July 2019 Restaurant Bailout. I clicked it open. The wire transfer receipt stared back at me, its numbers sharp and matter-of-fact. $170,000 transferred directly from my account to Sullivan Tavern, Inc. It had taken one phone call. Row, my father had said, out of breath, voice cracked. The business might fold. We're behind on payroll, and the loan fell through. I didn't want to call you, but I didn't let him finish. I wired the funds by 4 p.m. that day, never asked for repayment, never got one. I opened another folder, September 2020, ER bill. My father had collapsed during a charity fundraiser, no insurance coverage. I'd covered the bill before he was even discharged. Marjorie called the next morning. There's no need to bring this up, Ava, she said. He wouldn't want people knowing. Just be proud of helping. Helping. That was always the word they used when they meant hiding. I scrolled further. March 2022, tax resolution. I'd paid off a pending lien just days before the estate would have been frozen. The PDF from the county assessor's office was stamped cleared. No thanks. No mention. Just silence. My fingers moved from trackpad to drawer. I pulled out a thick cream-colored envelope, one I'd brought with me, not by accident. Inside was the original deed to the Sullivan venue. I unfolded it slowly, smoothing the edges. It still carried the faint scent of legal paper and dust. On the third page, above the county seal and inked signatures, was my name, Ava Sullivan, primary title holder via Vignette Holdings, LLC. Not Savannah, not Gregory, not the family trust. Me. I leaned back, the envelope heavy on my lap. I remembered the magazine article. It was 2 years ago, waiting at a terminal in Austin, scrolling through news on my phone when I saw Savannah's face. The headline, The Visionary Behind the Sullivan Revival. She stood next to Gregory in a photo, smiling, hand on his shoulder like she'd grown the business from soil and sweat. I hadn't even known she'd joined the project. It hit me like a dull weight in the chest, not sharp enough to break me, just persistent enough to bruise. I hadn't asked for applause. I just hadn't expected to be erased. My phone buzzed beside me. A text from Eli. "Made it home. You okay?" I stared at it for a moment, then typed, "Do you think they'll ever say thank you?" He replied almost immediately, "Do you still need them to?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stared at the reply, reading it twice. Then once more. Maybe once I did. Another buzz. This time, a call. Tasha's name appeared on the screen. I answered. "You sure about this?" she asked, no preamble. "Absolutely," I said. "You know, once it's sent, you can't unsend it." "I'm done being a footnote." There was a pause. Then, "All right. I'll have the summaries ready by morning." When the call ended, I stood, crossed to the small writing desk near the window, pulled out my portable printer, loaded a new ink cartridge, and clicked print. 7 envelopes, one for every key relative seated at that grand table earlier tonight. Each one would contain legal summaries, copies of transfer receipts, timeline breakdowns, my stake in the venue, the truth they conveniently forgot. As the pages slid out, warm from the machine, I folded each one carefully, aligning the edges like it mattered. It did. Intention was everything. I slipped the papers into crisp white envelopes, thick enough to demand opening. My handwriting was precise on each label. No flourish, no decoration, just names. Savannah, Gregory, Marjorie, Uncle Lewis, Aunt Lynn, Cousin Darren, and the chair marked reserved that no one had occupied. They'd all raised glasses tonight, applauded words that excluded me like punctuation. Now they'd read mine. In the soft glow of the suite, I sealed them. One for every chair that applauded my absence. I wore white again, but not because I was mourning anything. This time I wore it to reclaim what was already mine. The ballroom looked different in the morning light. Soft rays filtered through the high windows, bouncing off the crystal and turning everything pastel. The air smelled of citrus and croissants. Waiters moved gracefully between tables, balancing silver trays of fruit platters, smoked salmon, and tiny glasses of peach mimosa. A pianist played something light and forgettable in the corner. It was the kind of brunch where people complimented each other's scarves and talked about travel plans they'd never book. I stepped in without hesitation, my heels quiet on the polished floor. My hair was pinned back in a low twist, makeup soft, nearly bare. My white dress fell in clean lines, no frills, no noise. I passed 3 tables before anyone even noticed me. Marjorie was standing by the coffee carafe, pouring herself a refill. She turned and caught sight of me, her expression freezing just long enough to register surprise before she smoothed it over. "Didn't expect you today," she said with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I met her gaze evenly. "Didn't expect to be a shareholder either." She blinked, caught off guard, but said nothing else, just nodded once and turned away. The way people do when they know a storm is forming, but it's not their turn to speak yet. I moved toward the center of the room and found an empty chair at the edge of the action. Eli was already seated nearby, dressed in navy and calm as ever. He gave me a brief nod, supportive, silent but knowing. He didn't need to ask what I was about to do. I waited. Brunch rolled on, light conversations rippling through the room. A cousin recounted a trip to Napa. Someone gushed about Savannah's latest collaboration with a boutique hotel chain. Gregory was telling a story near the head table, laughing a little too loudly. I glanced toward the server near the entrance. He caught my eye. I gave the smallest nod. Then I stood. The clink of my glass against the stem of my fork wasn't loud, but it carried. Conversations tapered off. Forks paused mid-air. Even the pianist slowed, letting the last note hang longer than usual. "Before we celebrate the future," I began, my voice steady, "I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the real past." Every head turned. I've been told, I continued, that legacy is built on loyalty, on contribution, and on silence. But I believe legacy should also be honest. I gestured subtly to the server. He moved swiftly, placing one envelope at each of the 7 designated seats. Gregory's hand hovered mid-sip. Savannah, ever poised, tilted her head with a smirk. Marjorie folded her napkin carefully, but her jaw had tightened. "These," I said, "are just records. Documents, wire transfers, ownership claims, proof of participation that didn't make it into the speeches, or the brochures, or the dinner toasts." The room didn't move. Even the champagne seemed to still in its flutes. I looked at Savannah. Her smile had faded, replaced by something thinner, more calculated. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone," I said softly. "I'm here to clarify." I turned to the crowd, letting my words settle. "You can frame the stories however you want," I added, "but I own the building you're telling them in." There was a long silence. Then someone gasped. A fork clattered to the floor. In the far corner, I heard a whisper. "Did you know she was behind all this?" Followed by another, sharper, "Wait, she owns the venue?" Gregory's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope in front of him. I saw his eyes scan the first page. His face paled, mouth slightly open. Savannah chuckled once, too loud and too late. "Is this a stunt?" she asked, though no one responded. She looked around the room, searching for an ally and finding none. Marjorie kept her envelope unopened, as if even touching it might confirm its truth. I didn't move. I didn't plead or explain. There were no grand declarations, just presence. Aunt Lynn stared at me like she'd never really looked at me before. A few business guests checked their watches, not to leave, but to mark the moment. I let the silence breathe. Then I stepped back from the piano and returned to my seat. I didn't linger, I just watched and waited for the next lie to collapse. I didn't get a phone call. I got a headline. It was waiting for me before I even made coffee. The alert blinked on my lock screen. CEO's Cold Empire, secret deals, staff exodus, and a hidden romance? Published by a gossip blog that hadn't mentioned my name since I made Forbes' Rising Stars list 3 years ago. I tapped the article open. There I was, an old photo from a tech conference in Lisbon, standing beside my former mentor, Robert Pell, a man now comfortably married with 3 kids in Vermont. The caption didn't accuse anything directly. It just asked, slyly, how close were they really? Below it came a string of allegations. Sources close to former employees describe an icy, ruthless culture. Her rise was built on connections, not credibility. Some insiders say she piggybacked off her father's guilt. There were no names, no quotes, just shadow and suggestion. I read it once, then again. Then put the phone down and walked to the window of my downtown apartment. Eli stood in the kitchen, flipping through the Sunday paper like it hadn't already been set on fire digitally. He looked up. They went nuclear. Good, I said calmly. I was getting bored. My coffee machine hissed to life. Across the skyline, the evening sun was just beginning to dip behind the old county courthouse. Somewhere below, cars were honking. The world went on, but mine had shifted. At 4:17 p.m., Tasha called. I read it, she said before I could speak. And I already traced the leak. I sat down, laptop in my lap, phone balanced against my shoulder. How fast? Faster than they were sloppy. Savannah's assistant used her work email to forward the files. It pinged our firewall because it accessed a dormant archive. She never wiped metadata. I allowed myself a small smile. Rookie mistake. She tried to send it to 3 blogs. 2 passed, 1 published. Can we tie it directly to Savannah? Not yet, but we don't need to, not if we reframe first. I opened a blank browser window, created a new stream link on my media platform. No banner, no brand colors, just a white backdrop, muted blue shirt, natural lighting. You sure you want to go public? Tasha asked. I'm not yelling, I said. I'm clarifying. By 5:36 p.m., I went live. No script, just a glass of water, a quiet room, and the facts. Good evening. My name is Ava Sullivan. I've been called a lot of things this week, some flattering, some not. But here's what I haven't been called: a liar, and I won't let that change. I kept my tone even, no quiver, no edge. Let's talk about the photos, I said, holding up the full context: a conference agenda, meeting minutes, flight itinerary, all proving the image in question was part of a 5-person delegation. Nothing secret, nothing hidden, just success, framed sideways. Then I moved on to the leadership claims. Screenshots, memos, performance reviews, exit interviews. One by one, I lined them up. I didn't call out anyone by name. I just let the documentation speak. By the 2-minute mark, the comments were already coming in. Worked under Ava for 2 years. She was demanding, yes, but always fair. She mentored me when no one else would. This hit piece is so transparent I can see the interns behind it. The likes climbed fast. Shares followed. By 6:12 p.m., my PR firm called. "The tide's turning," they said. "Keep the stream up. Don't comment further." I didn't need to. The damage had been neutralized, not with heat, but with precision. I ended the stream with one line: "I don't need applause, just accuracy." As I closed the tab, a new message appeared on my secure app. It was from Devin, my cousin who always managed to know more than he should. "Cressling dinner, 8 p.m., Old Harbor Club. They're cutting you out of the deal." Of course they were. When truth doesn't work, they pivot to erasure. Again. I glanced at the clock. There was still time. Let them eat. I'd be serving something better tomorrow. While they toasted lies, I drafted truth, by hand with witnesses. The light inside the boutique co-working suite in downtown LA was soft, almost forgiving. Pale wood floors, high windows, a counter that served pour-over coffee 3 ways. It smelled like ambition and eucalyptus. I chose this place on purpose. No legacy ghosts here, just potential. Sylvie arrived at 10:03 a.m., right on time, blazer draped over one shoulder, a tablet in one hand, iced espresso in the other. She didn't do handshakes. She did eye contact. Director, measuring, but not unkind. "Let's build something no one can erase," she said, setting down her drink. We sat across from each other at a small round table and opened our laptops in sync, like 2 generals planning a campaign. Except ours didn't need weapons, just precision. We called it Legacy Reimagined, a venue concept that rejected glossy veneers and paper-thin speeches, luxury grounded in truth, weddings, anniversaries, retirement galas, all hosted in places that honored the full story, not just the curated version. Sylvie had the operational blueprint. I had the design eye and funding. Together, we sketched out a launch timeline. Phase 1, 3 pilot locations: Paso Robles, Santa Fe, and Asheville, each known for quiet elegance and loyal communities. While Sylvie drafted supplier contacts and design renderings, I refined the launch press kit. It was sharp but sincere. Stories of reclaimed agency, spaces reborn from omission. Tasha handled the legal structure. Our new brand was airtight. By Thursday, we had press emails queued. The campaign would drop Tuesday morning. Everything was ready. Then, Friday afternoon, the alert hit. Savannah's team had just filed a press statement claiming full creative stewardship over the Sullivan brand expansion, including the same southern markets we were targeting. They even used the phrase "legacy reinvented." No mention of me. Again. I read the statement in silence, fingers still poised over the keyboard. The audacity wasn't surprising, but it was sloppy. Tasha called within minutes. "They think they're outflanking you," she said. "They're playing checkers," I replied. "Let's finish the chessboard." By 3 p.m., my team had pulled the necessary receipts, emails where Savannah deferred strategy to my firm, financial records showing I'd funded the initial site surveys, a screenshot of her assistant asking, "Should we run this past Ava?" Sylvie leaned across the table, tablet in hand. "We leak this tonight?" I nodded once. Quietly, hospitality journal, then investor's line. No social posts. Let the facts walk in first. That night, as Savannah smiled her way through the crestling dinner at the Old Harbor Club, the leaks went live. By 9 p.m., headlines started to pile up. Backbone or borrowed face. Sullivan brand faces integrity questions. Emails reveal misrepresentation in Crestling deal. Funding trail points to ousted founder. Screenshots went viral. One commentator posted, "So who's really the visionary, Savannah or the woman she tried to delete?" By 11:20 p.m., Crestling issued a statement postponing all negotiations. The deal collapsed before dessert. I didn't gloat. I didn't even pour wine. I just sat by the window of my apartment watching LA's skyline shimmer like a map of open endings. Eli sent a text, "Justice tastes better slow, huh?" But I didn't reply. This wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Saturday came with emails from investors, journalists, former collaborators. Some curious, some regretful, some hopeful. All of them now remembered who I was. That evening, while I was reviewing a licensing contract with Sylvie, my phone buzzed. A voicemail from Marjorie. Her voice was clipped, uncertain, just 5 words. "We need to talk, now." I didn't show up to prove anything. I showed up to remember who I was. The morning air in Santa Barbara smelled like salt and warm rosemary, the kind that made you pause before reaching for your phone. I padded barefoot into the kitchen, the marble floor cool against my feet. Eli was already there, barefoot too, stirring something cinnamon sweet on the stove. He didn't speak, just offered a quiet smile over his shoulder. The villa was still. Not awkward, just still. A kind of stillness that only arrives after the noise has left and decided not to come back. I poured myself coffee, the kind he grinds by hand because he insists machines miss the nuance. As I sipped, he slid a small envelope across the counter toward me. No words, just his handwriting on the front. "For when the storm ends." Inside was a short note. 1 sentence. "They offered millions, but wanted the brand to shift. I said no, because you taught me to build something I'd still want to sign my name to." I looked up at him, and he didn't need to say anything else. Then my phone buzzed. A photo. No sender name. But I recognized the background instantly, the wallpaper in my parents' hallway, the chandelier with its missing crystal at the edge of the frame. Hanging there now was a new photo. Me and Eli, mid-laugh, taken at the Dubai summit. Beneath it, in clean serif font, one word, legacy. I stared at it for a long moment. It wasn't an apology, but maybe it was the closest they could manage. There was no caption, no message, just that image, framed and hung. The rest of the day moved quietly. I logged into my mentorship call, 38 young women waiting. Some were interns, some founders. All had questions that weren't just about funding or brand reach, but about how to keep your sense of self in a room that wants to rewrite you. I didn't lecture. I just spoke. "Success isn't what they call you," I said. "It's what you no longer have to explain." A few nodded. One teared up. Another wrote it down. That was enough. Afterward, I left my desk and walked down toward the edge of the estate, where the venue sat, still grand, still golden in the light. A few of the staff were outside setting up for another event. One of them caught sight of me and without a word raised his coffee slightly in a quiet toast. I nodded back. No applause, just acknowledgement. I returned to my desk, opened my laptop, and created a new document. Phase 2. Nothing flashy, just clean font. A blank page. The kind I'd always loved. Not because it was empty, but because it meant I could decide what came next. Later that night, as Eli read in bed beside me, my phone buzzed once more. Voicemail. From Marjorie. I didn't listen to the whole thing, just the first line. "We were wrong. If you ever come back..." I deleted it before she could finish. I didn't need to win. I just needed to stop asking for permission to exist. And in that silence, I found everything I'd been looking for. I didn't need applause. I just needed to stop asking for permission to exist. And in that silence, I found peace. Sometimes wounds don't need to be shouted to be seen, just the quiet strength to stay standing and the grace not to turn bitter. Because the deepest kind of recognition doesn't come from a room full of applause, it comes from within. If you've ever felt like a background character in your own family, let this remind you, your worth isn't something others grant you. It's something you remember for yourself. If this story stirred something in you, I hope you'll share your thoughts. Someone out there might be finding the courage to stand up quietly, too.